Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Senior Editor at Supply Chain Brain, and I'm delighted to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by HERE, the topic for which is data-driven predictive supply chains. I think we're all aware that there's no shortage of supply chain and logistics data out there. However, making good use of that data so that it benefits multiple stakeholders still remains a top challenge. Location intelligence allows companies to create a central unifying layer of data that cuts across functional silos, enabling enhanced visibility, workflow decision-making, collaboration, and responsiveness. The combination of location-powered analytics and predictive ETAs with logistics business operations data helps power a predictive supply chain. That way, you get the insights you need to optimize your operations end to end and pivot quickly to meet growing customer expectations. During this webinar, we'll be looking at how to solve location-related challenges and deliver rapid supply chain innovation. We'll also look at how to enhance transport planning and event prediction so you can deliver high-quality, reliable ETAs. We'll also look at how to optimize workflows across the entire transportation chain and how to overcome challenges when dealing with data quality, incomplete data, and data security. We're also going to touch on how to better understand your environmental impact in order to meet your sustainability goals. So there's a lot packed into this little webinar. After we introduce our two speakers, we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we'll move to a Q&A session with questions from you, the audience. Please submit questions at any time during the webinar using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so go ahead and ask anything you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured HERE will reach out to you offline. Right, let's get to our speakers. First off, we have Bart Koppelmans. He is Global Head of Industry Solutions at HERE Technologies. Bart leads the Global Supply Chain and Logistics Industry Solutions team, a customer-facing industry strategy, solution consulting, and business development team at HERE Technologies. He has over 15 years of experience in leading positions, always with a focus on new business creation and growth in key industries. Next, we have Manish Govil. He's from Amazon Web Services. Dr. Govil is the Global Supply Chain Segment Leader at AWS. He focuses on collaborating with supply chain software and services partners to help customers solve their challenges, leveraging the AWS cloud. Right, without further ado, I'm going to let Bart and Manish take it away. But first off, Bart, can you explain to me how HERE and AWS work together? How does that partnership work?
Yeah, sure, Helen, happy to do so. So AWS and HERE have a multi-dimensional strategic partnership, and together we are working to solve location-related challenges for enterprise and supply chain logistic industry segments across the globe. We bring the power of location services together with leading compute and IT services to really accelerate speed to market and time to value for our customers.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that, Bart. Now we're going to have a moderated panel discussion, and in order to dig a bit more into how a predictive supply chain actually comes about. So first question I wanted to ask you, Manish, is what are the challenges that shippers, retailers, and logistics providers are facing today, particularly surrounding fulfillment? What trends have you noticed among your partners?
And I thought you'll never ask, right? So if you look around right now, everybody is talking about supply chain these days, right? It's a good time to be in supply chains, sometimes not for the good reasons, right? Everybody's blaming everything on supply chains. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal which says supply chain ate my homework. So, so it's a good time to be in supply chain. But on a serious note, there are three key drivers of challenges when it comes to supply chains, right? And especially in the fulfillment domain. The first one really is customer expectations. Okay, the customers are just used to like a level of engagement because of things outside of work that they're demanding the same thing when it comes to work, right? So an example is they want faster delivery. They want everything now, right? Can you give it to me today? Can you, if not, can you give it to me tomorrow? And not just having it delivered faster, but they want to know exactly where it is at any given point of time. Okay, so visibility into where my shipment is becoming important, and not just from consumers, but businesses as well, right? So you have both of those things going on. And the other thing is that basically when there is a deviation, right, in terms of the delivery, they want to be notified proactively so that they can take actions, right? So that's really the first part in terms of customer expectations. Now, what that does for supply chain professionals like us is we have to operate at a very different speed, right? Much faster, and make decisions faster, right? To meet these expectations. And to do that, we have to align our processes, our organization, our IT systems to be able to cope up with that speed and operate at that speed. And the third area really is around managing disruptions, right? If you look at over the last couple of years, I think everybody's painfully aware of the disruptions caused by the pandemic, but that's not the only thing, right? We have had trade differences in the past. We have had hurricanes. We have had ships getting stuck in Suez Canal. We have had ports backed up. We have a war, unfortunately, in Europe right now. So there are a lot of things which are basically disrupting supply chains, right? And so what we have to do is react proactively, right? So we can sort of predict what the impact of some of those disruptions are going to be on our operations and take actions to minimize the impact, right? So those are the sort of the three key challenges that we are seeing.
Right, thank you. Bart, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, interesting, Manish. I think we can all recognize ourselves in that article, although I haven't read the details of it. But I think we all don't have time to do our homework anymore, right? So, but adding to that, what Manish is saying, building up a predictive supply chain really involves the collection, enrichment, and also analyze of different data points, right? And if you see what is happening out there in the market, most data is generated by each segment of the supply chain, which is fragmented, living in silos, and in the end is of low quality if you don't put this in the right context. And this also restricts our collective ability to generate really required operational insights. And these operational insights then to enable also enhanced visibility, workflow decision-making, collaboration, responsiveness, and last but not least, overall customer experience.
Right. So it sounds like what I'm hearing from both of you is that the underlying trends are that business B2B fulfillment is now subject to similar expectations as B2C. That, you know, what you're used to getting in terms of service when you order cat food online is becoming what you expect from your B2B partners. Is that an exaggeration, or would you say that's a trend that you're seeing?
That's very fair. That's very fair.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you. So tell me, again, Manish, perhaps you could start by telling us how increased visibility helps companies overcome these challenges.
So as I said earlier, right, so visibility is not only necessary for us to plan better, right, but this is almost an expectation from our customers. Now, by getting real-time visibility into any deviations that is happening, right, to our plans, we can quickly assess the impact that particular deviation is going to have, right? And that gives us more time to take actions before those disruptions or changes can actually basically impact the commitments that we have made to our customers. Okay, Bart, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree, Manish. And visibility means a lot of different things for a lot of different customers, right? So we really need to put this also in a customer's perspective. But from our perspective, right, real-time monitoring of fleets and shipments helps to identify disruptions and to respond proactively. And with that, we really get also accurate multi-model ETAs, be able to make decisions and correlate that with real world events. For example, to make sure that identify if a certain shipment is going to meet the delivery shot and can still go to on the same day delivery, or need to move to the next day kind of transport delivery schedules. And with that, you can also derive actual time of arrival notifications, which is important then also for your SLAs and your impact, and also to prevent issues and claims afterwards. Overall, you can really optimize the different pieces of the transportation process, all the way also into inbound logistics and reduce idle times with that.
That's fantastic. And Bart, so that all sounds great. So what makes it difficult to achieve this visibility? What's preventing organizations from shifting to more predictive supply chains by gaining these kinds of visibilities? And do these challenges differ by industry?
Yeah, I think what I already mentioned, right, and I touched up a little bit more in the details, shifting really to a data-driven culture has been a slow process for many companies, and there are several reasons for this. One of the biggest challenges is really to enable this data-driven decision-making and aggregating these multiple, the separate sources. Data is scattered, many different systems, companies, and also companies that are lacking skilled data scientists or analysts really to analyze certain data sets. So once the data is available, you need analytics to make sense out of that, right? Or to clean your data sets and to blend it with certain other data sets. And this is then relevant for your decision-making process. And this is where here is helping to connect the different stakeholders, different data sets, but also take our core capabilities, what we are already doing for years now into the supply chain logistics space, in order to make sure that you clean, blend, and aggregate different data sets to put that in a certain context and to collaborate with value-added insights for our customers.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that, I mean, one of the unique problems about supply chains is it involves a lot of external partners and very widely dispersed stakeholders. So what I'm hearing you say is that just even making sure that you're getting the right kind of data all in the same place across the silos is one of the big things preventing organizations from shifting in this direction. And that brings me to the question from Manish, you know, sort of, even if you can do all that, is achieving visibility enough? I know Bart was talking about analytics. You know, perhaps we could dig into that a little bit, Manish.
No, absolutely. And I just want to touch a little bit upon, just to add to what Bart said, right? So it's not only disparate data, but one of the reasons, if you dig down deeper, why people are not able to bring the data together is that data resides in legacy data stores that don't have an open architecture, right? And that makes it very difficult and expensive from a time, from resources, from a cost side of things, to bring that data together, to correlate it, to contextualize it, and then derive the insights that Bart talked about, right? So I think that's more important. Now, to your question about, okay, fine, if we are able to get visibility, right, is it enough? It's a first step, right? It's a starting point to have a responsive supply chain, right? But the key to really basically derive value from that is to analyze that data, right? And correlate from different data sources and mix real-time data with the learnings from historical data. And you can use different type of systems, maybe the power of technologies like artificial intelligence, and use that to predict the impact of those that visibility or the event that you are seeing from the current state, right, to the outcomes that you're going to have, so that you can actually rapidly optimize the future course of action, right? That's where basically the power of predictive supply chain comes in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That's very important. Thank you. Bart, perhaps you'd like to add a little bit about that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Manish. I think visibility and monitoring is the first step, but if you don't put this in a certain context, right, and aggregate kind of with your supply chain and logistic business process kind of data, then it's of less value. And this is also to become more predictive. You need to combine those different data sources from multiple kind of stakeholders to really achieve this this business impact and workflow impact overall.
Right. Yeah. It's not enough to know where something is. You need to be able to predict when it's actually going to show up. Right. So let's dig down a little bit into the detail and talk about location data. How does location data enable predictive supply chains? Bart, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So location data and analytics put your logistics operation data into context. What we do is adding real world events to that and alert notifications. And on top of that, not only data, but also machine learning analytics and models to make that more predictive. So we are combining the different data sources from what we have reside in our platform, and then combine that with logistic, also business operations data. For example, adding loading, unloading times together with traffic data, with location services, with drive times, actual drive times of certain trucks, and then to become more predictive in what is happening out there on a certain transport lane, or what is happening out there on a certain overall network perspective.
Wow. Okay. And does that include sort of weather data and things like that?
Correct. That's also something we would provide. Yeah.
So you're really providing contextualized geographical data to what's already being fed into the system. That's fantastic. Manish, could you perhaps explain a little bit about it as well?
No, I think he's covered well. So yeah, let's keep moving.
That's that's pretty cool, I have to say. Okay, here's another question for you, Bart. Initially, can you tell us how location intelligent AI and machine learning help predict ETAs in logistics, and what are the ETA building blocks and data needed to create those models?
Yeah, sure. As mentioned, right? So we basically combine our data sets with location, also logistics specific operations data. So it can be transport plan modes, loading, unloading times with our data sets. And that is then relevant for kind of the execution of that certain transport. But on the analytics part, really leveraging our machine learning and AI capabilities also to look at kind of then patterns in the end, right? So network on the network level, but on a transport lane level, learn from certain transports and actual kind of arrival times and actual kind of deviations within a certain transport lane from A to B, and then feed that back into also your future planning and execution processes. So this will then improve overall your future transport planning, your future hopefully reduce your handling, your waiting, your dwell then in the end. So it's a continuous kind of learning pattern in our models with these different data sets, which then contribute in the end to become more predictive and to become more automated in the end.
Right, and this is where the machine learning comes in, because this is an incredible amount of data, you know, traffic and weather and loading times and so many different elements coming together, and it's something that I think, you know, we've only recently gotten the kind of computer data crunching power to handle and the machine learning to handle that. So that's really interesting. Another question for you about what is the actual value in predicting shipment ETA, and can you help us understand the impact on specific metrics and overall supply chain KPIs?
Sure. Yeah, for example, actual time of arrival notifications are important for customers to determine if a subcontracted carrier has reached the warehouse based on agreed SLA, so real-time ETA, but also actual time of arrivals, then monitoring supports to avoid then potential issues and claims afterwards. And also, as already mentioned, touch upon a little bit before, it's also for middle mile transport important to understand kind of if that certain shipment can still go on that same day delivery slot or need to move to next day transport. So really help you optimize your operations on a near real time or a daily basis. And the business outcome for that is of course saving costs by optimizing your overall network perspective, but also prevent then claims, penalties, and let's not forget the most important one, to improve the overall customer experience, right? By improving your accurate information on a shipment level for your customers out there.
Wonderful. That's great. Manish, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so I just want to add a couple of things, right? So if you are easy to do business with, right? If you provide better predictable ETAs and people can trust you, then that translates into repeat business, right? And often basically gaining more market share, right? Because you provide a better experience to those customers. Now, if you do basically have a higher confidence in the ETA from your shipper, what that also does is it actually lets you hedge less when it comes to carrying inventory, right? So you can reduce a little bit of your safety stock. And when that happens, that frees up cash, right? So basically that's another benefit that you get. And if the ETAs are more predictable, you can use that to create better scheduling for your loading and unloading resources, right? And it improves their productivity and actually reduces their costs as well, right? So those are some of the other things on top of what was mentioned.
So fantastic. Thank you. That's quite a lot of benefits there. So here's another one for Ben. What role does location play in workflow automation? Can you give us some specific examples?
Yeah, sure. So using location service analytics will give you real-time alerts, guidance, geofence notifications, insight in your operational dwell times, and as already mentioned, so in lane performance monitoring, which you can then integrate into your workflows. And if you add AI and predictive location analytics to it, this will help you then provide more proactive also decision support into your business process, into your workflow, to really measure these performance metrics, measure your KPIs, and in the end then proactively automate this decision making. And one example also what we deployed in the yard and warehouse context is gathering data from the assets and the workforce and correlate that with your business process. That really understand your productivity, zone monitoring, understand your hours in motion, kilometers in motion, and then really connect this with your daily operations and your warehouse operations KPI, really to improve kind of that KPI and to improve based on the data and analytics underneath.
Wow, great. That's fantastic. So I think I was curious to know what extent advanced digital technologies can improve efficiency and visibility in a warehouse or yard. What are the challenges of warehouse and yard automation, and how can they be overcome? Manish, I think you have some experience here.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of areas in on the warehouse side, right? There's so much innovation going on in that space, but I'll just point out a few areas, right? So the first thing really is around IoT technology-based sensing, right? So if you have better sensors, you can get a lot of good data around location within that warehouse, geofencing, and logic related to how you apply that geofencing. It could be related to the monitoring of the health of the equipment that is operating in that space, so you can actually have better predictive maintenance and reduce the downtime of some of those resources, right? Because labor capacity is constrained right now. So the more productive the assets can be, I think the better it is for the operations. And then you have the area of robotic automation, right? This tremendous innovation that's going on, that how do you automate some of those tasks that help improve the productivity and the safety and basically the health of the operators in that organization, right? So that's there. And then you have capabilities which are powered by AI, like computer vision, right? Mm-hmm. How can you use the power of image-based analysis for multiple areas within a warehouse, right? Whether it's assisting in picking, packing, sorting, or each actually even in the areas of safety and alerting around that.
Right. Wonderful. Yes. So this whole idea of how robots work with humans is definitely a hot topic right now. I think people are learning that that robots can be very helpful in taking tasks off humans that perhaps they're not well designed to do, like lifting heavy loads and doing repetitive movements. That's fantastic. Um, Bart, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think Manish covered it quite well. The only thing maybe to add to that is also if you look at kind of the overall supply chain, and it's let's say from that yard and warehouse context, it's also important to understand kind of the outbound and inbound kind of logistics process. Really optimize kind of when a certain transport is arriving, and optimize kind of based on if it's going to hit that slot or not, or if a certain shipment is arriving, to then further integrate that also in your daily operations from a warehouse perspective. And this is basically also important then to correlate that, and you need multiple kind of also technologies, as Manish already touched upon, to really understand kind of what is happening out there from the stakeholders arriving to your warehouse, and then further integrate that from a flow perspective into your production and into your kind of warehouse operations.
Right, there's a kind of choreography going on in the warehouse, isn't there? And this kind of technology really helps orchestrate it well, I think. That's fantastic. So I wanted to get onto sustainability, and I imagine we'll have some questions from the audience about this too. But it's obviously a big concern today. And how does location technology impact a supply chain's sustainability practices specifically? Manish, perhaps you'd like to lead on that.
Yeah, so actually, Helen, sustainability is an existential issue for us, right? We as supply chain professionals have a critical role to play when it comes to sustainability, right? We can help reduce the carbon footprint by better planning and execution, right? When it comes to sort of optimizing the movement of goods, right? And if basically, if we don't have to move it, why move it, right? Or can we basically find out how best to move it? And I think a location technology plays a part, that if you have congestion, stuff like that, like what's the alternate route to take it, right? So we have even more impact on that. Now, we at Amazon take this very seriously when it comes to sustainability, right? In 2019, Amazon announced the climate pledge, a commitment to meet the Paris Agreement 10 years earlier, right, by 2040. And we have been taking a lot of initiatives in this area, right? We are actually the largest corporate buyer of renewable energy in the world, right? And our goal is to be to basically use 100% renewable energy by 2025, right? That's sort of one element, right? And we're also part of the First Movers Coalition, right, which targets a reduction of emissions when it comes to aviation or ocean or trucking, right, which basically reflects our commitment into this area. We even ordered 100,000 electric delivery vehicles from our partner Rivian, right, to further cut down on this emission. That's sort of warehouse operation, but I think one area that people sort of overlook, right, is just the cost of technology and compute around that, right? So actually, one of the studies that we have done, right, that the running workloads in AWS data centers is often up to 80% less carbon footprint than traditional data centers, right? And once we get to 100% renewable energy, it could be up to a 96% reduction. And we actually have a dashboard that shows what is your carbon footprint of consuming the AWS cloud, right? So awareness, I think, is often a first step of taking basically action and realizing what the impacts. I think a lot of these things provide you data then that you can use to make better decisions.
Right, that's fantastic. I know that I think for a long time people just weren't aware of how much energy was being consumed by data centers, and now I think I read somewhere recently that Bitcoin production alone accounts for the energy consumption of a small country, which is kind of alarming. Bart, what would you add to that in terms of location data aiding in sustainability goals?
Yeah, within here, sustainability is also a big part of our focus, and therefore we also recently launched our sustainability report. But focusing on my supply chain logistics domain, as Manish already a little bit touched upon, transportation visibility and data from the different stakeholders in the transportation chain gives you also better insight on the overall kind of footprint and an overall transportation footprint. And with these insights, you can also better understand dwell, transit time, and contribute with location-specific insights to the overall kind of network optimization. And we also recently launched a tool together with our partner Migros, really predict also the amount of CO2 produced for any given commercial truck route, get insights, recommendations on for vehicles, engines, and transport modes. And this is very important. So first of all, you need, and that's very important to understand your current footprint, and then making choices to further optimize your overall supply chain to meet your sustainability goals. And I think this is a very, very important and interesting topic, and we can almost do a separate webinar, I think, on this topic in total.
Sure. Yes, it's a very important one, and I think it's rapidly changing as well as people's appetite for these things grow. Thank you very much to Bart and Manish. Now we're going to move into our Q&A session with questions from you, the audience. Once again, please submit your questions using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so you should feel free to ask anything. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the HERE team will reach out to you offline. So let me see what we've got coming in here. So one question we have from an audience member is, how do you get GPS positions from the trucks? Bart.
Yeah, I can start with that. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I can happy to answer that. Yeah, so HERE technology is not a new player in the market, right? So we have a large footprint in the automotive industry as well. Our location services and data we are collecting also from the automotive side for already over 35 years. And this is also what we now are taking to the transport logistics market. And so we are gathering data from these multiple sources, also with an OEM kind of first approach with the large also truck manufacturers, and then also the integration of different telemetry systems out there in the market. So established connections to the different telemetry systems to really get that real-time positions from the trucks.
Fantastic. So it's a follow-on question. What are other top technologies our supply chain practitioners investing in?
So I can take a shot at that, right? So I think when it comes to basically using location data, I think that's a big area, right? So I think we talked about earlier that getting the data is important, but that then correlating the data on other things, right? So one of the questions that we work with our customers quite a bit is, yes, I know what basically when my shipment is arriving, right? But then I sometimes have a disconnect as to what is actually in that shipment, right? Because that information sometimes resides in a different system. So I think taking that information and saying, you know what, and correlating it with your basically manifest, right? And bringing those two together, and then continuing the thought process further, right? So correlating that data with, okay, basically what is the impact on my operations, right? So tying the location data with my planning data, right? And I think the planning could be one of two things. One, it basically could be my manufacturing planning, right? It could be my basically further downstream distribution planning. It could be my labor planning, right? So there is basically is the gathering of the data, but the systems for planning and execution downstream, right? I think those become very important. The second part really is about how do I continuously keep learning, right? So if a pattern is basically emerging, why is this particular route always late? Okay,
Nice.
that comes, right? So basically things, if you can learn from a machine learning perspective, right, you use the power of AI in that space, it becomes important that if I'm shipping, my shipment is every day at 10 o'clock, right, because I need to be X, maybe if I left at 11, it would be faster because there's always congestion on this route, right? So you basically use the power of AI and machine learning to augment your planning capability, right? So those are sort of 3 or 4 areas from a supply chain perspective downstream that you can add to this.
Fantastic. Wow, that's a lot. So digging into a few other technological questions here. It's always interesting when the audience wants to know these things. What is the best way to approach fuel consumption analysis and optimization? I think both of you would have experience with that. Perhaps Bart, you'd like to start.
Yeah, sure. There are different ways to go about this, and fuel consumption. Of course, you can measure from different kind of vehicles, and then based on tour and average emission factors. But we experience is also where we are moving now towards from is top down from averages to really bottom up calculations for analysis and improvement. And I think that's important to then understand your chosen vehicle type, right, and understand really the configuration, but also transport weight, distance, and topology of the route of that certain calculation. So to really improve and understand that overall consumption, and not only from a fleet perspective, but also then overall kind of network perspective.
Right. Yeah. So it's not just a case by case basis. You have to look at the bigger picture and how you're optimizing your network. Yeah. Fantastic. Another quite technical question, but two of them, I'm going to combine them about data. So first of all, somebody asked how important is data standardization in collecting data, and how do you basically encourage your different operators to standardize the data that they provide you, or do they have to? And then another question about data is, you've got different stakeholders in the supply chain working together, sharing data. How can they do it safely and securely so that nobody else gets sensitive commercial information?
Yeah, so I can take a shot at the second question, and then I'll come to the first one, right? So I think data security and privacy is a big part of it, right? Now, when it comes to consortiums, there is some level of trust already in there that basically when folks are coming together as a group, right? So if we can enable and extend that construct where basically the data that's coming in, right, has a level of permissions built in, and the store that you basically put the data in is secure. And I think that this is where some of the more open technologies around cloud can come in. In some cases, people talk about blockchain capabilities that could be relevant in some of these areas. But I think the technologies are out there. I don't think we are technology constrained at this point of time in that space. With the open architectures, it's quite possible. I think it comes down to really coming together. Now, which leads into the second question, that how much standardization should we have to basically drive this communication? And that's standardization is a very tricky area, right? Because each organization has their own way of, so you really can't impose a certain standard on everybody has this system slightly different, right? I think what really is important is if we're clear in terms of the communication of data and make it easier to provide the data that is needed by the other players in the system. I think that is a sort of basically a communication. Now, when I talked about, I think earlier about closed systems, right? That was a little bit of a tricky thing, that if you have basically a very specific relational database that has a schema or data warehouse where you're storing it, you can't provide that data unless basically the other side also has a similar thing, right?
Right.
But you have more open type of capabilities, right? And the data is stored in like more open data lakes instead of data warehouses, right? Or you have data which is basically resides in key value things, right? You're only exchanging portions of that, or if it's a graph database. So when you have purpose-built data stores which are sort of storing data that's relevant to that use case, it makes it much more easier to share the portions of data that needs to be shared without imposing basically everybody use a very specific type of standard.
Right. So in other words, we're going to have to get used to APIs. Is that right?
Absolutely right. I think, and those are fairly secure, and you have the APIs are actually becoming much easier to communicate with, and we have capabilities where you have serverless APIs, right, where you don't even have to run them on an ongoing basis on actually a server. You just call that API. It basically does the computation in milliseconds and give you the results, and it's done. There's nothing that you need to do beyond that.
Wow. Right. That's great. I think we're all sort of getting used to the way that the data actually seems to flow through these APIs that we've created. Amazing. So I want to broaden the picture out a little bit, although still on the technical side. What are the actual data ingredients behind predictive ETAs? What do you need to be getting all this data, or what are the data elements that you need in order to be confident that you're getting good predicted ETAs? Mark, maybe you'd like to.
Yeah, sure. I can happily take that, and I already touched upon a little bit, but from our perspective, it's really data from the order management system, from the TMS system. So based on transport plans, which modes are being used, and then correlate that with also the execution part, with kind of the data we have also on drive times, but then also customer data sets on loading, unloading, with our actually then telemetry data, traffic data, correlation out there on execution. And as mentioned, right, all these together then provide you a better actual time of arrival, estimated time of arrival, better insights overall over the overall transport journey. But then the predictive part is also that analytics and feedback loop of kind of the data. So the actual kind of data and actual arrival times, actual kind of what happened during that transport from A to B to become then also more, in the end, in the future, more predictive. Right.
Thank you. Here's another interesting question. In terms of supply chain prediction, is there any tool in your platform from ocean freight rates, or is that a separate? That's a kind of crystal ball.
No. So yeah, no, that's a good question, but no, that's not something we would let's say support. So we really focus on kind of the location and the location core, the location data, and location services, which can contribute in the end to kind of, as mentioned, right, the logistics, also operations data. But that is not something we would support. This is not our type of business services we will provide. No.
Understood. And perhaps along the same lines, but I think you probably do have some elements of this. How does the current climate change crisis impact logistics? It sounds like you're feeding in weather patterns and all sorts of things that are actually related to climate change. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be a use case we could contribute to, indeed, in general. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Another question of broadening it out a little bit is, sorry, we've got a lot of questions coming. How easy is it to scale these solutions globally? Do I have to start small and really master it before I expand, or can I implement this on a pretty broad basis?
Yeah, so from our perspective, let's say all our data and our services, we operate, we are a global company. So we have a global also footprint. So our services are also available on in every country across the globe. But it is very important, I think, when implementing them into the customer business. There are definitely regional kind of differences and dimensions we need to take into account, also from a data aggregation and data sourcing perspective. And this is relevant to take customer by customer case to see kind of where it contributes to the largest kind of business impact for the customer. So normally we would definitely support not immediately a global rollout, but start a really country, region, and kind of specific, and then scale from there.
Great, that's fantastic. And Manish, I think this is one for you. Will blockchain grow to be a must-have tool? What do we think about that?
I don't think there's any technology that's a must-have, right? So I prefer that. So the thing is, absolutely, blockchain has specific use cases, and it actually will have a role to play in supply chain, right? In terms of tracking things, where basically you have a distributed network where not all the players in the network have trusted relationship or have ongoing long relationships, right? So there's definitely basically a role for blockchain to play there. But there are basically also elements of supply chain where you do have a fairly tight sort of level of trust and collaboration. So there could be other technologies, I think goes back to the answer earlier, or the question earlier, in terms of basically what are the type of data exchange that you have, right? How can you communicate data more securely, faster, and with trust? So I think it's going to be a little bit of both.
Right. Okay. That's great, because it's such a buzz term now. I'm glad we addressed it. Bart, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I think Manish covered it quite well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So here's a question from the audience. They're talking about looking at future trends in data-driven systems for supply chains. I wondered if you had any recommendations for particular subjects or courses or skills that would be good to learn to get a good career opportunity in this field looking to the future.
I can start with that, and Bart, you can add to it, right? So I think we have been talking about data, right? So I think that probably there's some hint there. So while we as supply chain professionals obviously know our domains very well and the operational side of things, but what's becoming important is basically having better tools or better capabilities to think through and utilize that data, right? Defining basically what the data needs are for making newer types of decisions. How can we quickly do that, right? So some overlap with data science, right? I think that is an area that supply chain professionals should definitely look at. We talked about other technologies in terms of robotic automation. So people who are looking at from a hardware and warehouse perspective, that is an area to take a look at. I mean, basically taking the data analysis and prediction to the next level, AI and machine learning, right? And a lot of these sort of are powered by the underlying cloud technology. So those are some of the areas, and we at AWS actually do provide a lot of these capabilities. We have a big focus on driving supply chain, basically, which is enabled from a cloud technology perspective, right? So cloud trainings that are available that you can leverage, and we do it globally, right? So I think those are some of the areas I would say that you should look at.
That's terrific. That's great. So it's not just software. We perhaps look into the hardware too, with all these robotics and automation options coming in. But it does sound like data science is really the way to go. That's fantastic. Thank you. Bart, do you have anything to add to that?
I also was going to indeed touch upon it from my perspective. Data science and really machine learning analytics is becoming more and more important. And I think this is where, in general, right, the transport logistics and the supply chain domain has a lot to gain in terms of really making that jump to really valuable insights, etc. So more and more of these capabilities adding to the traditional supply chain logistics operation space is definitely required.
Right, that's fantastic. That's great advice. And just to get touch on finances for the moment, and we have a question here. What's the cost of implementing these technologies with predictive supply chain technologies? I imagine the answer is how long is a piece of string, but Bart, perhaps you could give us an idea.
Yeah, there is no single bullet answer to this one, right? So it really depends on customer by customer cases. So how we would normally do it is also look at customer specific business requirements and then really calculate also the impact on their KPIs and SLAs. It's really to quantify that and make that tangible also business case for a customer. So there is no, I cannot give one single answer to this, unfortunately.
Muted. We're running a little short on time here, so we've got time for one final question, and this is for both of you. How should companies get started on this kind of predictive supply chain technology implementation? How can they move towards intelligent predictive supply chains? What's the entry point? Bart, you go first.
Yeah, first step is really to start implementing that data-driven strategy and approach inside, I think, your company. Start with gathering the data sets, right? Connecting your assets, integrate, and then normalize these data sets from the different stakeholders. The third step will be then further to enrich this with other data sets. And then last is really that applied and analytics and machine learning models to become more predictive. So it's really a bottom-up approach. For start with gathering the data sets, start with monitoring, start with understanding what is happening, to then further work upon implementing these analytics.
Fantastic. That's a very clear answer. Manish, what is your point of entry?
No, so I think Bart talked about the point of entry, but one thing I basically want to talk about is that predictive supply chains is not a destination; it's a journey. Right. So I think the sooner you can get started on that path, I think the better it is. And I wouldn't say that wait for everything to fall in place. We believe in sort of starting and learning and building upon that, right? Because you don't really know exactly what data that you have available in the system until you start discovering and what it can be used for. So as you start using basically start deploying the most important use cases, you will find that the additional sort of insights that become available, right? So being flexible, but sort of building upon that as a journey, I think is important. So get started, get going, and then keep adding to that as we go along.
That's fantastic. So the message is don't wait, get started today, and start out with data flow. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you so much to Manish from AWS and Bart from here. And then a special thanks to everyone for participating. We really had some great questions today. I think we've learned a lot about how implementing a data-driven approach increases your ability to get a predictive supply chain, which I think is what we all want. We had a lot of questions today and we didn't get round to all of them. So we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. You're also going to get an email later with a link to view the webinar on demand, and you can feel free to share it with others. And there will also be links to some really interesting ebooks that you can see advertised on your screen here. Definitely a lot of stuff to dig into there. And there will, of course, be contact information for the folks at here so that you can get started as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your participation. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day.